I had this friend who was in jail. If I wanted him to actually be free, like out of the jail, which is what I wanted, then I needed to see him that way and feel like he was. The entire
Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet.
because we are only seeing like a slice of time instead of seeing.
What's more fun than a virtual reality game?
If you could have the answers to any questions, if the answer was presented to you, what kind of questions would you ask? What would your life become? How would your life be experienced?
Reality is a game. Reality is virtual.
Reality is simply an imagination experience. Be mindful of how you wander.
You're about to learn how to play by watching me play.
About 2 years ago, I had this friend who was in jail. Said he was like not online. I normally could talk to him online. And they said that he was in like solitary confinement or something because he got in a fight. I was naturally kind of like a defender, protector of the people that I love and care about. So there was like this rage that built up. And I wanted to like blow up the jail. But I remembered the reaction is also part of the cause that caused the reaction. Because everything is present.
Okay, now here's where things get really, really weird.
My theory on this is that all possibility of what reality could be is in superposition, and it's all available right now. The assumptions that are made right now about what is true, so those subconscious beliefs, they have a past and a future, or that's the way it seems to us, because we are only seeing like a slice of time instead of seeing the whole. Time is not something that's linear. It's something that we are making up because of how we operate subconsciously. We believe that one thing leads to another, causes another, like in a linear fashion, but it actually isn't working like that. It seems to be working like that because that's how we've made sense of reality. We subconsciously believe that it operates. How it operates is how you assume right now. Let me give you an example. Say we discover a new species of animal. We assume that animal has had a past. We assume it's always been in existence. The more we look and wonder about its past, what it does, how it evolved, we find it because we're assuming that about it. As we assume that in the moment, the reality of it is created. The past of that animal is created in that moment.
Then physicist John Wheeler had an idea. He called it the delayed choice experiment. How it works is photons are projected through the double slit, but the detector is not activated until after they pass through the slit, but before they impact the screen. Photons were emitted as waves, passed through the slits as waves, but when the waves were observed before hitting the screen, they suddenly behaved like particles again. Still don't think there's an intelligence at work? Well, what Wheeler's experiment showed is that even though the electrons started as waves but behaved like particles after being observed, at the moment the decision to observe them was made, the electrons recorded themselves as having passed through the slits as particles. The electrons change their state by going back in time.
Last bit of sneakiness that we can play with atoms. Surely now, we're going to get to grips with it. Leave the detector there, but just very quietly go and unplug it. Don't let the atoms know that you're not spying on them. Run the experiment again. Now, if you can explain this using common sense and logic, do let me know, because there's a Nobel Prize for you.
It's as if the particles are aware they're being observed. These experiments confirmed a theory first proposed in the 1950s, that time as we know it doesn't exist. Kozyrev concluded that all time is simultaneous and infinite, that past and future are just metaphors. There is no past or future, there's only now. He also believed an interaction occurs between time and the human brain. That's why there are concepts such as intuition or foresight. This is human consciousness tapping into time energy. But time can also be influenced by human consciousness, by thoughts and by feelings, which can affect the physical world.
We assume that the past influences the future. That's how we appear to experience reality. But when you look at this block, why would one side be the past and one side be the future? Why go left to right and not right to left? Why can't the future influence the past? Take away the names past and future if that helps you think of this concept. So what if the past influences the future and the future influences the past in an endless feedback loop? So then the question is, which part of the past is influencing which part of the future and vice versa? And the answer is, all time is affecting all time, all the time. Can me 5 minutes from now influence me 10 minutes ago, just as me 10 minutes ago influences me as a baby, just as me as a baby influences me on my deathbed? But everything we know says this is the way it is. So if every moment is co-creating every other moment, both forward and backward in time, then reality would be this massive neural network spanning space and time.
Time, like the river, is always there. Past, present, and future all at once. When the torsion from time energy ripples through the ether, that information is transmitted instantaneously everywhere. The past, the present, and the future. And Kazurev proved it.
Reality for us is what we can sense with our sensory surfaces and what we can make sense of with the signals in our brain. The signals in our brain are as necessary for our experience of reality as the sensory signals that come from the world.
There are neuroscientists and biologists that agree that the physical reality that we see are interpretations from our mind. I want to take it a step further and say, what about our mind itself? But they tend to attribute the mind to the brain. But isn't that a physical object of the world as well? What I want to say is that the mind is not the brain. Neurons that fire in the brain are happening as a result. It is an interpretation of who we believe ourselves to be.
So I'm going to use a metaphor to describe how the brain works. It goes something like this. Your brain, my brain, everybody's brain, is trapped in its own dark, silent box called your skull. And the brain has no knowledge of what is going on around it in the world or in the body, right? Because it's in this skull. And it's receiving sensory signals from the sensory surfaces of your body. These signals are the outcomes of some changes in the world or in the body. But the brain doesn't know what the changes are. It's receiving the outcomes. And that is what philosophers and scientists call the reverse inference problem. You start with an outcome and you have to guess at the cause. For example, if you hear a loud bang, it could be a car backfiring, a door slamming, it could be a gunshot. Your brain doesn't know what the causes are, it only knows the effect. And so it has to guess. And the guess is important, right? Because you would do different things if it's a gunshot versus if it's a windy day that slammed a door. And luckily, it has one other source of information, and that is your past experience.
What we are doing is making sense of who we are. Before there was a brain. Say that you're just these single cells. These cells begin to think. How are we thinking? Well, they don't even have a word for it. What is this that I'm experiencing? And then what happens is the brain develops to explain the experience of what is happening. And so evolution would be this entire process of, I'm experiencing this, what is this? Questioning, what is this? And then something physical, real comes in to explain it. And it evolves. So for instance, in this story.
One night, Reverend Samuel Parris's daughter did her best impression of the exorcist, screaming and convulsing. Now, from your 21st century perspective, you're probably correctly assuming that the young lady had a serious medical condition. But the good folks of Salem hadn't seen all 19 series of Grey's Anatomy, so their medical knowledge was lacking. Thus, they came to a rather different conclusion. It must be the work of witches. Word spread faster than the plague, and before you could say Avada Kedavra, accusations were flying left and right. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friends accused friends, and hysteria gripped the populace. It was like an episode of Love Island with slightly more demonic possession. Some people claimed they saw witches flying through the night sky on brooms.
The way that they explained that story in the past was that she was a witch. Now we said, as people evolved, they're like, that can't possibly be, that's loony. That is, there must be a logical explanation. But we have come up with these more medical reasons for why people act the way they do, or to explain things that don't make sense to us. Now we can explain them, now they make sense. But we still do this. Think of all the experiences in reality that you cannot explain. You don't know the answer to them. You have a lot of guesses. You may have guesses, you may not, but you don't know the answers to them. But you're looking for explanations. Whatever your mind allows to be the explanation is what you're going to find. This is why a lot of people who are so involved in conspiracy theories find evidence for their conspiracy theories. And why people who believe that it's all bullshit find evidence as to why it's all bullshit. And why people who have more open minds to be able to see things that others don't see, like UFOs, ghosts, things like that, see these things and other people don't. If they believe that that's what it is, they're more likely to find evidence for that thing being that thing. But if they question that and say, well, that can't possibly be the answer, and look for other evidence, there must be a logical explanation as to what, they're going to find that evidence. Because neither one of them are objectively real. Where your mind goes is where reality's gonna go. Now, there's people who can read other people's minds, experience different locations like remote viewing and stuff like that. They're like, what is the explanation for that? Trying to find that explanation or understand that explanation, there's going to be evidence for that explanation that comes around. Instead of just thinking that I am limited to maybe this human body that you're experiencing right now, you'll start to realize there's so much more to you. It's the same process with who we are. And the way that we interpret what we see is based on who we believe we are. For instance, just like she mentioned, when you hear a loud sound, and then it can be a gunshot or it can be a firework, like it can be these different things, right? And she says we draw on these experiences from our past to basically interpret and see the reality that we see. What I have come to understand is that it's all me. It's teaching me about myself. Why is that experience in my reality? What is it trying to show me about myself? Sometimes it's trying to show me how I am copying that experience in another portion of my life. If reality is something that I do not like, I'm afraid of, it's showing me where I am subconsciously creating that experience. For instance, if someone comes up to me and lies to me, how I question that experience is going to determine what I see. So if I'm like, that person's attacking me, they're the enemy, they're out to get me, more evidence of that will be in my reality.
That is why the only thing to fear is fear itself, because fear creates a fearful experience. Suspicion creates a suspect, but trying to understand out of curiosity, love, and awe can create a wonderful experience.
Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet.
Samson.
The Israelites had done evil in the eyes of the Lord again, which is kind of a theme in Judges, and so God delivered them into the hands of the Philistines. But God was also super into helping people who couldn't have babies back in the Old Testament. So while the Israelites were having their time out under the oppression of the Philistines, one of his angels came to a woman who had long prayed for a child, and said, "Drink not wine, nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." And so the child was born, and the family made sure to keep the Nazarite oath. a special oath among the Israelites, not only to obey God's laws, but also to refrain from alcohol, keep away from corpses, and never cut their hair their entire life. Foreshadowing. The boy grew up strong, mighty like no other. And when he was old enough to wed, he went to the city of Timnah, and there he met a woman he desired to marry. But his father and mother were shocked, for this woman was a Philistine. After much begging and pleading, he convinced them that they should come with him and arrange the marriage. So, as they went through the vineyards towards the great city, a great lion blocked their way. It roared with rage, ready to spring upon them. But before it could leap, the Spirit of God filled Samson, and with his bare hands, he grabbed it by the jaw, and with bone-splintering strength, rent its head in twain. Safely arriving in the city, the marriage was arranged. When at last the time for the wedding came, Samson went back to Timnah. But on his way, he saw something strange. It was the lion he had slain. In its carcass, a swarm of bees had made a nest. So he reached in and scooped out a handful of honey, eating it as he went. How this qualifies as either A, a good idea, or B, not an unclean thing under Nazirite rules, I don't know. But apparently Samson thought it was a great idea. An idea so great that he even gave his folks some of the honey without thinking to mention where it came from. And it also inspired one of the most unfair riddles of all time. Because at his pre-wedding feast, Samson stood up and said to his 30 groomsmen, "If you can solve my riddle by the 7th day of our feast, then I will give you 30 garments and 30 new sheets. But if you can't, you owe me the same." And the groomsmen said, "All right, let's hear this riddle." So Samson intoned, "Out
Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Because the identity that I assume that I am is someone who eats, reality around me provides things to eat. If the identity I assume I am is strong, that automatically creates that which is weak, because without the weak, I could not be strong. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, when people see things as beautiful, ugliness is created. When people see things as good, evil is created. Being and non-being produce each other. Difficulty and easy complement each other. Long and short define each other. High and low oppose each other. There's many physicists that are still puzzled over retrocausality or backwards causation, but what they have seen at a future result seems to cause the past to happen. But what's really happening is all based on right now. It's all connected. So whatever event is happening right now is based on the assumptions of who you are. It implies that a footprint in the sand caused the person to put it there. And it's because the cause and the effect are one and the same, all from right now. There's not one that's in the past and one in the future. I'm going to break this down with Samson's story. The lion came upon him. Now the assumption of the lion was that Sam could harm him because the lion growled. The lion growled because in his being, he would growl at things that he thinks could cause harm. And because of that assumption, Samson ripped him to shreds. And Samson, like the lion, reacting to danger, ripped the lion to shreds. Now, inside of the lion, which Samson saw was dangerous, something was birthed that was sweet. Beehive with honey. Inside everything that seems dangerous or evil or dark, also its opposite. Inside everything that's sweet, also its opposite. The entire universe is contained within everything. Samson's people were under the rule of the Philistines. Samson's mission, or what was prophesied over him, was to bring them out of their rule. The first thing that he suggested do that's mentioned in the story was he wanted to marry a Philistine. So the initial assumption of Samson is not that he's oppressed by them, but they're good enough to marry. But his family, his people are like, no, you can't do that, because their assumption is the Philistines are bad. He was showing them exactly what to do to not be held captive anymore.
If I wanted him to actually be free, like out of the jail, which is what I wanted, then I needed to see him that way and feel like he was. The entire day I kept imagining him in my mind as free and powerful and not needing my defense and my protection. That night, And I drove around the jail like 3 times around the block, and I was listening to music about freedom and like really feeling it. I was seeing him as like this powerful person, like walking out of the jail, but like the walls crumbling down, walking out, and how anywhere he goes, he's free. And I did that, and I felt it so much in me that he was free. Like I didn't want him to be free because I felt it in my singing, in my being. Well, the next morning I found out he was out. He was actually out before I even did that.